Daddy, why did Mommy call her Clara? Lily Whitmore's question landed so softly that Ethan Whitmore almost missed it, but when he looked across the diner and saw the waitress standing beside their table, his entire world seemed to stop. Clara Bennett was holding a coffee pot in one hand and a small plate in the other. She was 31, with chestnut brown hair pulled loosely behind her shoulders, a simple blue uniform, and the quiet expression of someone accustomed to being overlooked. She stared at Lily. Lily stared back. Ethan's hand tightened around his coffee cup. "What did you just say, sweetheart?" he asked. Lily tilted her head. "Clara." She pointed toward the waitress. "That's her name." Ethan swallowed. "Yes. But how do you know that?" Lily looked confused by the question. "Mommy told me." The diner seemed strangely quiet for a moment. Outside, rain tapped against the windows of the little roadside restaurant, and the neon sign above the entrance hummed faintly through the gray afternoon. Ethan was used to silence. 6 years ago, silence had become part of his life when he lost his wife, Emily. Since then, he had learned how to live inside expensive rooms that felt empty, how to attend meetings worth millions of dollars without hearing a single word, and how to smile for cameras while quietly making sure his 8-year-old daughter never saw how lonely he really was. But Emily had never mentioned Clara Bennett. Not once. Ethan slowly turned toward the waitress. "Have we met before?" Clara's fingers tightened around the coffee pot. "No," she said. Too quickly. Lily looked between them. "Yes, you have." Ethan froze. Clara's face lost what little color it had. "Lily," she whispered, "you don't remember me." "I do," Lily said simply. "Mommy showed me your picture." Ethan's heart began beating harder. "What picture?" Lily reached into the small pink backpack beside her chair and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She opened it carefully, revealing an old photograph that had been worn soft around the edges. Ethan recognized Emily immediately. She was younger, smiling beneath a summer sky, one arm around Lily as a toddler. But standing beside her was someone Ethan had never seen in any family photograph. "Clara." Ethan looked up. Clara had stopped breathing for a moment. "Where did you get that?" he asked. Lily answered before Clara could. "It was in Mommy's box." Ethan stared at the photograph again. His wife had kept secrets. That thought was difficult enough. But then Lily pointed to Clara's silver necklace, the tiny star resting against her uniform. "Mommy said you promised you'd come back." Clara's eyes filled with tears. Ethan stood slowly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. "Come back from where?" he asked. Clara looked at him, and for the first time, the calm waitress disappeared. Beneath it was a woman carrying 6 years of silence. "Ethan," she whispered, "your wife asked me to wait." And suddenly, the billionaire who could buy almost anything in America realized there was one thing money had never been able to give him: the truth about the woman he had loved. "What did you just say to my daughter?" Ethan's voice was quiet, but the question carried across the diner with enough weight to make Clara stop beside the table. Lily looked up at her father, unaware that the air around them had changed. Clara set the coffee pot down slowly. "I said I knew your wife," she answered. Ethan studied her face. "That is not what I asked." Clara lowered her eyes. "No, it is not." For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Rain continued tapping against the windows, steady and soft, while the smell of fresh coffee and warm cinnamon drifted through the room. Ethan glanced at the photograph still resting in Lily's small hands. Emily stood in the picture with her familiar smile, but Clara was beside her, one hand resting gently on Emily's shoulder. The photograph looked old. Not 6 years old. Older. Ethan reached for it. "Where did you get this?" Lily handed it to him. "From Mommy's wooden box." Ethan's expression tightened. He knew the box. It had been stored at the back of his bedroom closet for years, beneath old sweaters and papers he could never bring himself to sort. He had opened it only once after Emily died. Then he had closed it and never touched it again. "Lily," he said gently, "did you open that box?" "Yourself?" "No. Grandma helped me find it last month." Ethan frowned. "And she showed you this picture?" Lily shook her head. "Mommy did." Ethan went still. "Your mother could not have shown you that picture, sweetheart." Lily looked at him with the innocent certainty only a child could have. "Not in person, Daddy." Clara closed her eyes for a moment. Ethan noticed. "What does that mean?" Clara whispered. "Your wife recorded something for Lily." Ethan's heart sank. "A recording?" Clara nodded. "She asked me to keep it safe." "For 6 years?" "Yes." Ethan stared at her. The answer seemed impossible. Why would Emily give anything to you instead of me? Clara looked toward Lily, then back at him. Because she knew you would be hurting. Ethan felt something inside him shift. He had spent 6 years believing Emily had left behind a perfect silence. Now he was beginning to realize she may have left behind a message. Lily reached for her father's hand. Daddy, Clara was Mommy's friend. Ethan looked at his daughter. How do you know that? Lily smiled faintly. Because Mommy told me to remember her. Clara turned away, pressing her lips together as tears gathered in her eyes. Ethan noticed the tiny silver star around her neck again. He remembered seeing that necklace once before, years ago, in a photograph Emily had kept inside a drawer. He had never known who the woman wearing it was. Clara, he said, why did my wife know you? Clara finally looked at him. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Because I was there when she needed someone most. Ethan's expression changed. Where? Clara took a slow breath. At the hospital. The words settled between them. Ethan remembered those final months too well. The long hallways. The quiet conversations. The days when Emily smiled even though she was tired. But he had been there whenever he could. Or at least, he thought he had been. What were you doing there? He asked. Clara looked at Lily, then at the photograph. I was the nurse assigned to her room. Ethan said nothing. 6 years of grief had taught him to fear surprises. But this was different. This was a missing piece of the life he thought he understood. Clara reached into the pocket of her apron and touched something hidden there. Your wife gave me one last thing, she said. And she made me promise not to give it to you until Lily remembered my name. Ethan stared at her. Lily quietly squeezed his hand. Clara looked at the little girl and whispered. She remembered. Then why did she give it to you? Ethan asked. Clara looked down at the small silver star around her neck, as if the answer had been waiting there all along. Because your wife knew you were not ready to hear everything, she said. Ethan stared at her. You knew me that well? Clara gave a faint, sad smile. No, Emily knew you that well. Lily sat quietly between them, her little hands wrapped around a warm mug of cocoa she had barely touched. The diner had emptied around them. A few customers had left beneath the rain, and the soft clatter from the kitchen had faded into the background. Ethan had built his life around control. In boardrooms, he could read a contract worth $50 million in minutes. In business, he knew exactly when to speak, when to wait, and when to walk away. But sitting across from Clara, he felt none of that certainty. What did she give you? He asked. Clara hesitated. Not here. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Why not? Because Lily is here. Lily immediately looked up. I can't hear you. Clara smiled gently. I know you can. Ethan reached for his wallet, but Clara shook her head. You do not need to pay for anything. He stopped. I was not going to. You were. A small smile appeared on his face for the first time that afternoon. It disappeared almost as quickly. Clara took a folded receipt from the counter and wrote an address on the back. Come here tonight. Ethan looked at the paper. It was an old address only 15 minutes from the diner. What is there? A place Emily trusted. Then Clara walked away before he could ask another question. Ethan watched her disappear through the kitchen doors. Lily tugged gently at his sleeve. Daddy. Yes, sweetheart. Are you mad at Clara? Ethan looked toward the doorway. I do not know yet. Lily thought about that. Mommy liked her. The words landed quietly. Ethan looked down at his daughter. Did Mommy tell you that? Lily nodded. She said Clara was brave. Ethan felt a familiar ache in his chest. Emily had always been careful with words around Lily. She had believed children remembered more than adults realized. But Ethan had never imagined she had been preparing their daughter to remember a woman he had never known. As they left the diner, the rain had softened into a mist. Ethan opened the passenger door of his black SUV and helped Lily inside. Before closing the door, he noticed something tucked beneath her backpack. What is that? Lily pulled out a small envelope. I found it with the picture. Ethan carefully took it. His name was written across the front in Emily's handwriting. For several seconds, he could not move. 6 years disappeared in an instant. He remembered Emily sitting at their kitchen table, writing birthday cards for Lily. He remembered her handwriting on grocery lists, notes beside the coffee maker, and little messages tucked into his briefcase. He had not seen it in years. His thumb traced the edge of the envelope. Daddy, Lily asked. Open it. Ethan looked at her. Are you sure? Mommy said you should. His breath caught. He opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Emily standing in a hospital hallway, smiling beside Clara. On the back, there was one sentence. Ethan read it twice, then a third time. If Lily remembers Clara, it means the time has come. Ethan lowered the photograph. His eyes met Lily's in the rearview mirror. And for the first time, he wondered whether the woman he had lost 6 years ago had been trying to lead him somewhere all along. Why would Emily leave me a message like this? Ethan asked quietly, staring at the photograph in his hands. Lily did not answer. She was watching the rain slide down the window, humming the same little melody she had hummed earlier that afternoon. Ethan noticed it immediately. The tune was familiar, but he could not place it. "Lily, where did you learn that song?" She looked back at him. "Mommy sang it." Ethan felt a chill of recognition. Emily used to sing that melody when Lily was a baby. But there was something he had forgotten. One person had always been there during those quiet moments. Clara. Ethan looked at the address written on the back of the receipt. The old building stood in a quiet neighborhood near the edge of town, less than 15 minutes from the diner. By the time they arrived, the rain had stopped. The streetlights reflected across the wet pavement, and the evening air smelled of fresh rain and damp leaves. Ethan helped Lily out of the SUV and held her hand as they walked toward a narrow brick building with faded white trim. Clara was already waiting by the entrance. "You came," she said. Ethan held up the photograph. "You knew this was coming." Clara nodded. "I hoped it would." Lily stepped closer to her. "Is this where Mommy came?" Clara smiled gently. "Sometimes." Ethan looked at the building. "What is this place?" Clara opened the door. "A small community center. Your wife volunteered here before Lily was born." Ethan stopped. "Emily never told me." "There were many things Emily kept quiet," Clara said. "Not because she did not trust you. Because she wanted to protect the people she loved." They entered a small room filled with shelves, children's books, old photographs, and framed drawings. Lily immediately walked toward a table in the corner. On it sat a wooden music box. She touched the lid carefully. "I remember this." Ethan looked at Clara. How could she remember this? Clara did not answer. Lily opened the lid, and the familiar melody filled the room. Ethan closed his eyes. The memory came back slowly. Emily sitting on the floor beside their daughter. Lily barely old enough to walk. Clara sitting nearby with a cup of tea. Ethan had seen the scene before, but he had never understood who Clara was. "You were here," he whispered. Clara nodded. "Almost every week." Ethan turned toward her. "Why did you disappear?" Clara looked at the floor. "Because Emily asked me to." Ethan's expression changed. "She asked you to leave?" "She asked me to give you time." Clara walked to a cabinet and pulled out a small wooden box. "After she passed, I came here for almost a year. I kept waiting for you to ask about me." Ethan stared at the box. "Why did you not? Tell me." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Because you were grieving, Ethan. And because your wife made me promise." She placed the box on the table. "She said you would eventually come looking for the truth. But she did not know when." Ethan slowly opened the lid. Inside were several letters, a faded hospital bracelet, and a small recording device. His hands became still. "What is this?" Clara whispered. "The last recording Emily ever made for Lily." Ethan looked at his daughter. Lily was staring at the device with quiet certainty. "Mommy said you would know when to play it." Ethan looked at Clara. "And you waited all these years?" Clara nodded. 6 years. The room fell silent except for the faint melody from the music box. Ethan picked up the recorder, but before he could press the button, Clara spoke softly. "There is one thing you need to understand first." Ethan looked up. Clara took a slow breath. "Your wife did not leave this message because she was afraid of dying. She left it because she was afraid you would spend the rest of your life believing you had failed her." Ethan froze. Clara looked directly into his eyes. "You did not fail Emily, Ethan. But she knew you might never forgive yourself." "Daddy, please play it." Lily's voice was soft, but Ethan could not move. He held the small recording device in both hands, staring at it as though it contained a piece of the past he had spent 6 years trying not to touch. Clara stood quietly beside the wooden table. She did not pressure him. She simply waited. That was what she had always done, Ethan realized. "Waited. What if I cannot listen to it?" he asked. Clara looked at him with quiet understanding. "Then you do not have to." Ethan looked at Lily. His daughter was watching him, not with fear, but with trust. "Mommy wanted you to hear it," Lily said. Ethan swallowed. "How do you know?" Lily pointed toward the wooden box. "She told me." Ethan almost smiled. "You were 3 years old." Lily shrugged. I remember some things. The room grew still again. Ethan finally pressed the button. There was a faint click, followed by a few seconds of soft static. Then Emily's voice filled the room. Hello, my little star. Ethan closed his eyes. His breath caught immediately. It was her. The same gentle voice. The same warmth. The same small pause before she spoke when she was choosing her words carefully. Lily smiled. Mommy. Emily's recording continued. If you are hearing this, Lily, then you are older now. And if your daddy is sitting beside you, then something happened exactly the way I hoped it would. Ethan opened his eyes. Clara looked down. I know your daddy, Emily said through the recorder. He will probably want to understand everything. He will probably blame himself for things that were never his fault. So before he does that, I need him to listen. Ethan looked away. The room seemed suddenly too small. Ethan, Emily's recorded voice continued. You gave me more love than I ever knew how to ask for. You gave me a family. You gave me Lily. And when life became difficult, you never stopped showing up. Ethan pressed his lips together. His eyes filled with tears, but he stayed still. Emily continued. There may be days when you believe you should have noticed more, done more, or somehow changed what happened. Please do not carry that burden. You were my husband, not my doctor. You were Lily's father, not the person who could control every moment of her life. Lily reached for Ethan's hand. He took it immediately. Emily's voice softened. And there is one person I need you to trust. Ethan looked toward Clara. Her name is Clara Bennett. Clara lowered her head. She became my friend when I needed one. She helped me when I was tired. She listened when I was afraid. Most importantly, she loved Lily without ever trying to take your place. Ethan stared at Clara. Something inside him shifted. Emily had known her, trusted her, chosen her. The recording continued. If Lily remembers Clara one day, do not be frightened. I asked Clara to stay away until you were ready. I knew grief could make even kind people build walls around themselves. Ethan looked down at his daughter. Emily's final words came slowly. Ethan, please do not spend the rest of your life protecting Lily from love because you are afraid of losing it again. Let her have people who care for her. Let yourself have them too. And if Clara is still willing to be there, let her. The recording clicked off. No one spoke. Outside, rain began again, tapping gently against the windows. Ethan remained seated, holding Lily's hand. After several seconds, he looked at Clara. Why did you really stay away? Clara wiped a tear from her cheek. Because Emily asked me to give you time. Ethan shook his head slowly. 6 years is a long time. Clara nodded. I know. Lily looked between them. But Mommy said you would come back. Clara smiled through her tears. Yes, sweetheart. I promised her. Ethan looked at the photograph on the table, then at the woman who had carried his wife's final promise for 6 years. For the first time, the silence in the room did not feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them had expected. Do you still have it? Ethan asked. Clara looked at the wooden box on the table. Have what? The promise. Clara was silent for a moment. Then she nodded. Every word of it. The room had grown quieter since Emily's recording ended. Lily sat beside her father, gently turning the silver star necklace around her fingers. Ethan looked at Clara differently now. The suspicion had not vanished completely, but it had changed shape. It was no longer suspicion of a stranger. It was the uncertainty of a man discovering that someone had been carrying a piece of his family's story for 6 years. Tell me everything, he said. Clara took a slow breath. I will. She sat across from him. But I need you to understand something first. Your wife never wanted me to replace anyone. She never asked me to become part of your family. She only wanted Lily to have someone who remembered her mother. Ethan looked at his daughter. Lily was studying an old photograph from the box. Why did Emily need you? He asked. Clara looked down at her hands. Because toward the end, she was tired. Not just physically. She was worried about what would happen to Lily after she was gone. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. He remembered those nights. Emily had smiled whenever he entered the room. She had told him she was fine. He had believed her because he needed to. Believe her. Clara continued softly. She knew you loved Lily more than anything. But she also knew you would try to protect her from every difficult memory. Ethan looked at her. She was right. Clara gave a small smile. She knew you well. Lily looked up from the photograph. Was Mommy scared? Clara paused. Sometimes. Ethan lowered his gaze. Clara continued. But she was not afraid of you. She was afraid that after she was gone, you would forget how to live. Those words stayed in the room. Ethan had heard variations of them before, from family members, friends, even his own daughter. But hearing them through Clara felt different because Emily had trusted her with them. What happened after the funeral? Ethan asked. Clara looked toward the window. I came here the next morning. Why? Because Emily asked me to. And then, I waited. Ethan frowned. For me? For Lily. Clara explained that Emily had left a simple instruction. If Lily ever remembered Clara's name, Clara was supposed to return the photograph, the letters, and the recording. Until then, she was to remain a quiet part of the past. Ethan stared at the wooden box. Why would Lily remember you after 6 years? Clara smiled gently. Because children remember love differently than adults do. Lily looked at her father. I remember her voice. Ethan turned toward his daughter. You remember Clara's voice? Lily nodded. She used to sing with Mommy. Clara's eyes filled with tears. You remember that? Lily smiled. A little. Ethan felt the room become still again. He looked at Clara. There is something you have not told me. Clara knew immediately what he meant. Yes. She reached into the wooden box and pulled out another photograph. This one was different. It showed Emily holding baby Lily in a hospital room, while Clara stood nearby. But on the back, in Emily's handwriting, were 6 words that made Ethan's heart stop for an entirely different reason. She is the one who saved me. Ethan read the sentence again. Then he looked at Clara. What does that mean? Clara did not answer immediately. She looked at Lily, then at Ethan. It means your wife knew I would be the person she needed. Before either of us understood why. Ethan waited. Clara finally whispered. And there is one more thing Emily asked me to give you. She opened the bottom drawer of the cabinet and removed a sealed envelope. Ethan recognized the handwriting instantly. His name was written across it. But beneath his name were 3 words that changed everything. Open this alone. Open it alone. Ethan repeated, staring at the sealed envelope. Clara nodded. That is what Emily asked. Ethan looked toward Lily, who was quietly studying the old photographs on the table. Why would she not want Lily to hear it? Clara answered softly. Because this part was meant for you. Ethan took the envelope and stepped toward the small hallway outside the room. For 6 years, he had avoided anything that made Emily feel close enough to touch. Now he was carrying her handwriting in his hands. He opened the door to a quiet office and sat at a wooden desk beneath a warm lamp. For several seconds, he simply stared at his name. Then he opened the envelope. Inside was a single letter and another photograph. The photograph showed Ethan and Emily on their wedding day. They looked younger, hopeful, almost unaware of how quickly life could change. On the back, Emily had written one sentence. This was the day I knew he would be a wonderful father. Ethan lowered the photograph and unfolded the letter. Ethan, if you are reading this, then Lily remembered Clara. That means you finally know the truth I could not explain while I was still here. Ethan stopped reading for a moment. His eyes moved over the words again. Emily continued, I know you. You will wonder why I kept Clara from you. You will wonder why I trusted her with things that belonged to our family. Please do not mistake silence for secrecy meant to hurt you. Clara was there because I needed someone who understood what I could not always say. Ethan leaned back slowly. The room seemed to grow smaller around him. He remembered the last year of Emily's life, the hospital visits, the quiet mornings, the moments when she had looked at him and smiled without saying much. He had always believed those silences meant she was tired. Now he wondered how much she had been trying to tell him. The letter continued. There was one thing I could never give you without making your grief heavier. A chance to say goodbye properly. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. You did not fail me, Emily had written. You loved me. You stayed. You became Lily's safe place when I could no longer be there. That is enough. Ethan covered his mouth and breathed slowly. Outside the office, he could hear Lily's quiet voice as she spoke with Clara. Their laughter was faint, almost ordinary. That sound somehow made the letter harder to read. Emily continued, I asked Clara to stay away because I knew you would blame yourself if she returned too soon. You would ask what she knew. You would ask what I had told her. You would search every memory for something you missed. I did not want you to spend the rest of your life looking backward. Ethan wiped his eyes. Then he reached the final lines. Clara knows the parts of my story that I could not share with you. Not because she was more important than you, but because sometimes another person can hold a piece of our pain without asking us to carry it alone. If she comes back, let her. If Lily remembers her, let her. And if one day you find yourself smiling again, do not feel guilty for it. Ethan lowered the letter. For the first time in 6 years, he allowed himself to smile through his tears. Then he noticed something written at the very bottom of the page, almost hidden beneath Emily's signature. There is one truth Clara has never told you. Ethan froze. He read the sentence again, then again. His heart began to race with questions. He opened the photograph Emily had enclosed and turned it over. On the back was another message. Ask Clara why she left the hospital the night before I made this recording. Ethan stood immediately. He walked back into the main room. Clara looked up. Lily was beside her, holding the silver star necklace. Ethan placed the photograph on the table. Clara, he said quietly, what happened the night before Emily made this recording? Clara's face changed. She looked at the photograph, then at Ethan. For several seconds, she said nothing. Finally, she whispered, your wife asked me to make a promise that had nothing to do with her illness. Ethan waited. Clara looked at Lily. It had everything to do with you. What did Emily ask you to promise? Ethan's question was barely above a whisper, but Clara heard every word. She looked at him for several seconds before answering. She asked me to promise that I would never let you believe you had failed her. Ethan's expression softened with confusion. That was the promise? Clara nodded. There was more. The little community center seemed to hold its breath around them. Lily sat quietly at the table, tracing the edge of the old photograph with one finger. Clara walked toward the window and looked out at the wet street. The night before Emily made that recording, she asked me to come to her room alone. She knew she did not have much time left. She was calm. She was more concerned about you than herself. Ethan lowered his eyes. What did she say? Clara turned back. She said you had started blaming yourself. Ethan did not answer. Clara continued. She told me you had been searching for answers in every appointment, every test, every conversation. She said you were carrying a weight that did not belong to you. Ethan remembered those nights. The questions he had asked doctors. The promises he had made to Emily. The quiet drive home after every difficult appointment. He had always wondered what he could have done differently. Clara stepped closer. Emily knew that after she was gone, you would try to turn grief into responsibility. Ethan looked at her. She knew me too well. She loved you, Clara said. That is why she knew. Lily looked up. What did Mommy say about Daddy? Clara smiled gently. She said your daddy would become the strongest man she had ever known, but not because of his business. Ethan looked down at the floor. She said strength would mean learning to ask for help. Those words struck deeper than he expected. For years, Ethan had built walls around his home, his schedule, and his heart. He had hired the best tutors for Lily, arranged private travel, surrounded her with every comfort money could provide. Yet somehow, he had forgotten that children needed more than protection. They needed connection. Clara reached into the wooden box and removed a small folded note. Emily gave me this too. Ethan took it carefully. What does it say? Clara answered, read it. He unfolded the paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. If Lily ever asks about Clara, tell her the truth. Tell her Clara was there when I needed courage. Tell her she was never a stranger. Ethan looked at Lily. Did Mommy ever talk about Clara after that? Lily nodded. Sometimes. Ethan's eyes widened. Why did you never tell me? Lily looked confused. I thought you knew. Clara closed her eyes briefly. Ethan sat down beside his daughter. What did she say? Lily thought carefully. She said Clara had a kind heart. She said Clara knew how to listen. Ethan looked toward Clara. That sounds like her. Clara smiled faintly. Your wife was very observant. A quiet moment passed. Then Ethan noticed something else inside the wooden box. Beneath the letters was a small hospital card with a date printed on it. He recognized the date immediately. It was the day before Emily had made the recording. But beside the date was a handwritten note. Ethan must not hear this until he is ready. Ethan looked at Clara. What is this? Clara hesitated. Something Emily asked me to keep because she was afraid you would misunderstand it. Ethan's voice remained calm. Then tell me. Clara took a breath. The day before that recording, Emily asked me to make a decision. Ethan waited. What decision? Clara looked at him with tears in her eyes. She asked me to become part of Lily's life if you ever allowed it. Ethan stared at her. Clara continued. Not as her mother. Not as a replacement for anyone. Just as someone who would remember where Lily came from. Lily quietly reached for Clara's hand. Clara looked down at the little fingers holding hers. Ethan watched them. For 6 years, he had thought protecting his daughter meant keeping the past behind a locked door. Now he understood something Emily had known all along. Sometimes healing begins when someone finally opens that door. Then Clara said the one thing Ethan had never expected to hear. Emily did not ask me to return when Lily remembered my name. She asked me to return when you were ready to trust someone again. What if I am not ready? Ethan asked. Clara looked at him quietly. Then you do not have to be. Ethan glanced at Lily, who was still holding Clara's hand. But Emily thought I would be. Clara gave a gentle smile. She hoped you would be. The words settled over the little room with a warmth that seemed to soften everything around them. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Streetlights shimmered across the wet pavement, and somewhere beyond the windows, a car passed slowly through the quiet evening. Ethan looked at the woman standing beside his daughter and realized how much had changed in only a few hours. That afternoon, Clara had been a stranger. Now she was carrying memories of Emily that Ethan had never known existed. He did not suddenly understand every missing piece. He did not know what tomorrow would look like. But for the first time in 6 years, he was no longer afraid of the questions. Clara, he said, why did you really come back today? She looked at Lily. Because she remembered my name. Lily smiled. I told you I would. Ethan almost laughed. It was a small sound, unfamiliar after years of keeping his emotions carefully contained. Clara noticed. Emily would have liked that. Ethan nodded. She would have. Lily looked between them. Can we go home now? Ethan looked at the clock. It was nearly 8:30. Yes, sweetheart. Then Lily asked, can Clara come with us? Ethan paused. Clara immediately stepped back. You do not have to answer that. Ethan looked at his daughter, then at Clara. He remembered Emily's words. Let her. Let Lily have people who care for her. Let yourself have them too. Yes, Ethan said. She can. Lily smiled so brightly that Clara had to look away for a moment. They walked outside together. The night air was cool, and the city seemed quieter than usual. Ethan opened the back door of the SUV for Lily, then held the passenger door for Clara. She hesitated. Are you sure? Ethan nodded. I am trying something new. Clara smiled. What is that? Trust. The word was simple, but for Ethan, it carried 6 years of weight. During the drive home, Lily talked about school, her favorite book, and a drawing she wanted to finish before bedtime. Clara listened carefully. Ethan watched them in the rearview mirror. Nothing felt forced. Nothing needed to be explained. It was simply a father, his daughter, and a woman who had kept a promise long enough to bring an old memory back into the light. When they arrived at Ethan's home, Lily ran upstairs to get ready for bed. Ethan and Clara remained in the kitchen. The house was large, elegant, and almost painfully quiet. Clara looked around. It is beautiful. Ethan smiled faintly. It never felt like home after Emily. Clara did not answer immediately. Then she said, maybe because home is not a place. Ethan looked at her. What is it? Clara glanced toward the stairs where Lily's footsteps could be heard. It is where someone remembers you. Ethan stood quietly. Those words stayed with him. Later that night, he walked into Lily's room and found her asleep, the old photograph resting safely on the nightstand. Beside it was the silver star necklace. Ethan gently placed the wooden box beside the photograph. He did not put it back in the closet. He left it where the morning light would reach it. In the hallway, Clara was waiting. She is asleep, Ethan whispered. Clara nodded. Thank you for letting me stay. Ethan looked at her. Thank you for keeping your promise. Clara smiled. Your wife asked me to wait. Ethan looked toward Lily's room. And now? Clara's eyes softened. Now we do not have to wait anymore. Ethan stood beside her in the quiet hallway. No grand announcement followed. No perfect answer arrived. There was only the gentle sound of Lily breathing in her room and the faint hum of the house around them. For years, Ethan had believed healing meant forgetting the pain. Now he understood something different. Healing was remembering without being trapped by yesterday. It was allowing love to return without asking it to replace what had been lost. And sometimes, a second chance does not arrive with noise. Sometimes it simply walks through the door, takes a child's hand, and quietly reminds a family that love never really left.